wall. As we watched, paralyzed with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity, the shadow moved. It didn't glide or slide. It seemed to detach itself from the wall, elongating and twisting like black smoke before it simply vanished. One moment it was there, a solid patch of impenetrable darkness, and the next it was gone. A collective gasp escaped our lips. Sarah let out a small, terrified squeak and buried her face in my back. Omar was muttering prayers under his breath. Even Ali looked pale, his bravado completely shattered. "What was that?" he whispered, his voice shaking uncontrollably. "It moved! I saw it move!" There was no logical explanation for what we had just witnessed. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was something else. Something that didn't belong. The house was no longer just old and creepy. It felt alive, and it felt like it was watching us. The feeling of being unwelcome was a physical weight pressing down on us from all sides. The game was no longer fun. We just wanted to get out. Panic set in. "I want to leave," Sarah cried, her voice muffled against my jacket. "Let's go home, now!" Omar nodded vigorously in agreement, his flashlight beam shaking so much it looked like a frantic firefly. "The dare is over, Ali. We came in. Let's go." But just as we turned to retreat back towards the kitchen, a loud bang echoed from that direction, followed by the sound of splintering wood. It sounded as if a heavy piece of furniture had been thrown against the door. We were trapped. The way we came in was blocked, and the only way out was to find another exit, which meant going further into the haunted depths of the Kothari mansion. With our escape route cut off, a new, more terrifying thought entered my mind. What if the noise wasn't just a random event? What if something had deliberately blocked our path? Ali, trying to regain some semblance of control, took a deep breath. Okay, don't panic," he said, though his voice wavered. "There has to be another way out. A back door, maybe. We just need to find it." He pointed his flashlight up the grand staircase. "Let's check upstairs. It's our only option." The thought of climbing those stairs into the pitch-black unknown was horrifying. But the thought of staying in the hallway with the memory of that shadow was even worse. Reluctantly, we began our ascent. The wooden steps groaned and creaked under our weight, protesting our intrusion. Each step seemed to take an eternity. As we climbed, a new sound started, faint at first, then growing clearer. It was the sound of a child giggling. It was a light, playful sound, but in the context of this dark, decaying mansion, it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever heard. The giggling seemed to come from the top of the stairs, echoing down to us. It was a girl's voice, and it sounded like she was playing a game. A cold dread washed over me. We weren't alone. There was someone or something else in the house with us. When we reached the top landing, the giggling stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was somehow more frightening. The upstairs hallway was a maze of closed doors, each one promising more unknown horrors. "Hello!" Omar called out, his voice trembling. "Is anyone there?" His words were swallowed by the oppressive silence. Then the little girl's voice whispered, seemingly from right behind him, "Come and find me." Omar yelped and spun around, his flashlight beam cutting wildly through the darkness, but there was nothing there. We were caught in a twisted game of hide-and-seek with a ghost, and we were most certainly it. The mansion was playing with us, and we were losing. We scrambled down the upstairs hallway, desperately trying doors, but they were all locked or jammed shut. The little girl's whispers and giggles followed us, seeming to come from every direction at once. Sometimes she would be right behind us, sometimes in the room ahead. "Getting warmer," she would whisper, sending shivers down our spines. We finally found a door that creaked open. It led into what must have been a master bedroom. It was enormous, dominated by a huge four-poster bed with tattered curtains. But the most prominent feature was a massive, ornate wardrobe with a full-length mirror set into one of its doors. The mirror was surprisingly clean, reflecting our terrified faces with perfect clarity. We stood there for a moment, catching our breath, the relative silence of the room a brief respite. Sarah was the first to notice something wrong with the reflection. Her eyes widened, and she pointed a trembling finger at the mirror. "Look!" she breathed. We all turned our gaze to the polished surface. There, standing among our reflections, was another figure. It was a little girl, no older than 7 or 8, with long dark hair and wearing a pale, old-fashioned dress. She wasn't smiling. Her face was pale and serious, her eyes large and dark, filled with a profound sadness. She was standing right behind Ali in the reflection, her hand almost touching his shoulder. We spun around instantly. There was no one there. The space behind Ali was empty. We turned back to the mirror and she was still there, a ghostly image trapped in the glass. She hadn't moved. She was just watching us with those mournful eyes. Ali let out a strangled cry and stumbled backward, away from the wardrobe. The girl in the mirror didn't move, but her reflection slowly lifted a hand and pointed. Not at us, but at something behind us in the room. We followed her ghostly finger with our flashlight beams, swiveling them towards the 4-poster bed. This was the climax of our terror. As our lights hit the bed, we saw that the tattered curtains were slowly, deliberately being drawn back by an unseen hand. The fabric rustled as it moved, revealing the dusty mattress beneath. But it wasn't empty. Lying on the bed were 4 dusty, child-sized dolls, arranged side by side. They were old and worn, with cracked porcelain faces and button eyes. One doll was dressed like me, one like Ali, one like Sarah, and one like Omar. The little girl in the mirror wasn't pointing at the bed, she was pointing at the dolls. She was pointing at us. A silent scream caught in my throat. We had to get out. We had to escape before we became part of her collection. A wave of pure, undiluted terror propelled us into motion.